Hey, all right, we're back with another Inner Circle video today. So today we're talking about emotional eating and what we're really hungry for. So we're going to take a few minutes to start by just checking in, not just what with, running back through what you've been eating recently, but how you're feeling, because they both go hand in hand. So a lot of times women can relate to this, and the topic is emotional eating. And before we go any further, I just want to make one thing very clear at the start of this little coaching chat is that emotional eating sometimes we feel can be associated with shame, guilt, not having enough willpower. You're just not strong enough to cope with fighting against emotional eating. But there's something that many of us have to figure out a way to cope with life, cope with food, and understanding that when we reach for food as our coping or comfort zone is because food does bring a comfort. There's a reason they call it comfort foods, right? Think of like when you're sick and we associate sick with chicken noodle soup to, comfort you while you feel sick. It can be associated with pleasure, distraction, relaxing, um, and sometimes it gives us that sense of control when other areas of our life may feel really chaotic because we can always control what we put in our mouth, right? So instead of asking ourselves, like, why can't I control myself and stop this emotional eating? We really need to start asking ourselves, okay, what's really going on with me right now? And why is maybe I'm upset and I want to reach for the bag of chips and I just want to pound the whole bag of chips. We just have to kind of really dig deep into what's going on with you right then in that moment and really figuring out what you're really hungry for, right? So let's start with, why do we eat when we're not hungry? So sometimes we're physically hungry, but sometimes we're stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted, lonely, bored, sad, celebrating, maybe looking for comfort, or maybe just needing a break, like taking a time out from life, right? And so, if we're honest with ourselves, we've all been at those days and we've all had to sit down, or we've all, had a busy day, and then we come to the end of that day and, it's nighttime and you think, you know what, I deserve a treat. I've been good. I deserve a little treat yourself moment, right? So, let's put it in the instance of some real life scenarios. Like maybe you take care of, a family, lots of kids, adult parent, older elderly parents, or whatever the case may be, is you're spending a lot of time helping everyone else all day long at work, whatever it is. And maybe you had a bad day at work and work was awful that day, or you had an argument with someone, or you're just plain old exhausted. Maybe you've got that endless to-do list that's just looming behind you like a big storm cloud, and it's just overwhelming you and putting you in this bad mood. And now you suddenly have, that cookie, the bowl of ice cream, the bag of chips, whatever happens to be your comfort food is starting to talk to you, right? And say, what would be really good if you just like downed me all in one sitting, right? So that doesn't make you weak. It just makes you a human, right? We all have experiences. We've all gone through it. And we just need to come up with a way of understanding that the food has become the coping mechanism, and it gives us a temporary relief, or it provides a temporary feeling of comfort, pleasure, distraction, relaxing, a break from the stress that is life, right? Or maybe even something to look forward to. And it doesn't always have to be like naughty foods either. So like maybe you really love eating sushi, and I wouldn't consider sushi, unless you're getting like super deep fried stuff or something, you know what I mean? But for the most part, sushi's very clean rice, vegetables, protein fish, that kind of thing. So we can assume that it doesn't necessarily have to be something dirty, like you're eating, brownies mashed up in, cookies with chips sprinkled on top or something. Like just thinking ultimate junk food is what we think a lot of times emotional binging or emotional eating kind of leads to. But we can also think of it as, you know, maybe you're overeating your favorite sushi food to cope with a stressful day at work. Um, and the problem isn't that the food makes us feel good. There's no problem that, eating the ice cream or eating the sushi or the chips makes us feel a certain way. I don't think we ever come to eating food and think, oh, I really hope this makes me feel like shit, right? We don't generally do that because, like, if like eating jalapeno poppers upsets your stomach, makes you feel really bad, a lot of the times you're like, I'm not going to eat. Hey, I like the way they taste in the mouth hole, but, I pay for it later with indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea, right? It's like we don't, so you've kind of known, like, I can't go there because I just know the ramifications aren't always positive. So the problem is when food becomes our only way of coping with uncomfortable emotions. So you're associating, this list of uncomfortable feelings or emotions that you're having, and the way to get through them is to reach out for this list of foods that equals smiley face happy time for you, right? So we can't have every stressful day automatically ending with food that is going to be on this list that, let's say, they're your red light list, right? Like they're foods that you shouldn't be eating a ton of because they don't either make you feel good, they don't make your results on the scale appear, or they don't make your performance in the gym great. So they're foods that are your red light, right? They're not green light, they're not yellow light, they're red. They're like, I know I shouldn't be eating these. On my personal level because of the way they make me feel X, Y, and Z, but I'm doing it because I have these uncomfortable emotions and I don't know how to deal with them. And the best way I've come up so far with dealing with them is eating these foods, right? So if every stressful day automatically ends with food, we never have an opportunity to learn other ways to manage the stress. So that's really what it all comes down to, is we have to figure out how to manage this stress that's coming in the form of our emotions, right? And so our goal isn't I'll never emotionally eat again, because that's probably never going to happen, right? That's going to be really, really hard. Our goal should be is I want to have more tools in my toolkit that I can deal with when these emotions and these feelings and this emotional eating type thing kick in, because we know it's going to come, right? We know, we've lived long enough that we know that this is going to come up. And all I need are ways to deal with it that are more positive in the way that I want to go with my goals, right? So the first thing we need to do is just kind of assess the situation, right? So we need to pause. So we need to find those moments when we're like, you know what, maybe you just got off a really hard conference call or phone call or something that was just, exhausting, stressful, disappointing, sad, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden you go, oh, you know what? I got that Milky Way shoved in in my bag for later for a special treat. What'll make me feel good if I go eat that right now? And maybe you're like, okay, I need to stop for a moment, take a breath, and then ask myself, like, am I physically hungry? No. Am I emotionally hungry? Meh. Am I a little bit of both? And there's no really wrong answer to these. You just need to run yourself through them before you start putting stuff in the mouth hole, right? So we need to pause and think, okay, am I physically hungry? Is my stomach growling? Am I getting my hunger cues? What's happening physically? Am I emotionally hungry? And we'll talk about that, the emotional hunger situation. Or am I a little bit of both? So there's no wrong answer here. If you're physically hungry, your tummy's growling, you haven't eaten in several hours or whatever, and it's time to eat, then you need to go eat. If you're emotionally hungry, that's simple information. Now we can ask another question. What am I really needing right now? So if you're finding yourself being in the emotional hungry category, you need to break it down to the next level and say, what do I really need right now? So we need to figure out what the trigger is. What's triggering this? Like, I'm going to go pound a whole bag of Lay's potato chips because I'm stressed out. We need to figure out what that trigger was. What, if we go backwards in the chain, what was the trigger that made the bouncing ball go down to where you're pounding a bag of sour cream onion, right? And I joke about this stuff because I've done it myself, right? This is the stuff that we've all done, and it's like usually in the secrecy of your four walls at home, right? Or you don't generally want people seeing you emotionally eating and throwing a munch on stuff that you're like, and they're like, whoa, holy cow, right? Unless you're, you know, I digress, but you get the idea, right? So we need to think about what happened right before you wanted to eat. So we need to ask some questions to figure out what this trigger is. So it's like, what am I feeling right now? What happened today? What happened immediately before I wanted this food? Am I stressed? Am I tired? Am I lonely? Am I bored? Am I frustrated? Am I looking for comfort? Am I trying to avoid with dealing with some feelings that maybe suck? They're not very fun. They're not fun to talk about. They're not fun to feel. And so I need to like find a way to deal with it, and the best way I can come up with is emotional eating. And then you need to think back, like, what have I actually eaten today? You know, am I restricting myself, or am I generally hungry? Um, some of these questions, as you ask them to yourself, I encourage you not just to ask them in your mind and do the mental checklist, but to write them out and answer them in written form or type them out. And your answers may surprise you because maybe you don't need that snack, right? Maybe you need sleep. Maybe you need a connection with someone. Maybe you need a break. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to cry. Maybe you need to just like go outside and touch the grass, or maybe you need to just say no to something. And if you've spent the entire day taking care of somebody else and haven't taken care of yourself, it comes back to that saying of like you can't, pour into people when you have nothing to pour from yourself, right? We need to pour into ourselves so we can pour into others. But if you've got an empty jar and there's nothing left to pour, what are we doing here? So we need to take a step back and see what is it that I really need? Okay, I slept like crap last night. I didn't sleep well, and now I'm cranky, tired, and I had a bad phone conversation at work. And now what'll make me feel better if I eat something naughty or whatever. I eat a red light food that I don't necessarily need just based on emotion, when really what I probably need to do is drink some water and go take a nap. And then I'll feel a little bit more recharged, right? Or you can refresh. It's like kind of like when you restart your computer and you do the old Control Alt Delete, clear the brain, turn it off for a bit, turn it back on, and what do you know? It works, works dandy. Sometimes when you just need to turn the brain off, turn the phone off, if you know what I mean. So if we take a step back and try and look at, okay, what do you need in this moment? What is triggering this feeling? We got to go backwards up the chain. So we need to work on building our emotional toolbox. And this is some alternatives to food, right? So we can't have food as our only coping strategy. If you've found like, hey, I am doing this, that the way that I cope with these feelings is by giving myself my favorite cake or my favorite cookie or my favorite coffee from the coffee stand place or whatever it is. Let's say, and we'll go through some different emotions, and let's start out with stress because that's the top common one. You can try taking some slow deep breaths, going outside for a 5 to 10 minute, you don't even have to walk. You can just be sitting outside in the sun for 5 to 10 minutes, stretching. Maybe you put on some music, you take a shower, um, writing out, journaling what's stressing you, and then asking yourself ultimately, what can I actually control when it comes to this matter? Because a lot of times we're looking for the control in the emotion, and a way you can control that is by putting food in your mouth, right? That makes you feel a certain way. Maybe you can't control that this person said these mean things and it upset you, but you can, work on your way that you're reacting to it, how you're taking that, how you're dealing with it, and making sure that you deal with it in a positive way rather than a way that negatively affects you by, maybe taking you off your fueling plan that you wanted to do and your food that you wanted to eat. Um, Another one is when you're exhausted and you don't need food, maybe what you need is sleep, shower, put on your comfy clothes, maybe 20 minutes to just decompress by yourself, go to bed earlier, or just give yourself permission to rest. Like it's okay to just sit down on the couch, watch your show, read a book, and rest versus having to do that endless to-do list that's overwhelming you. Sometimes you need to recharge the battery before you just keep draining it, right? At some point, there's only so much you can drain out of your battery, and then you have to charge it. Uh, Being lonely, very common. You can call a friend, text somebody, um, go for a walk, invite someone to go for a walk, or take your pet for your walk, or play with any pets that you have. Spend time with your family. Get out of the house. A lot of times, instead of isolating, we need to go out and do something. So you can, go to a support group, or you can go to a church function, or you can go, to the local library, and they have, events going. Find a way to like take yourself out of that rut when you find yourself feeling lonely. Frustration, if you're angry, a lot of these are all going to be simple things that you can relay into all these informations. If you're upset and angry, you can, talk it out, listen to loud music, go hit a heavy bag or something like that. Do something physical, knock out some push-ups, put that somewhere where you can, take that anger and kind of diffuse it. And my favorite way to do that is just working out because it's a great stress reliever, in terms of when maybe you're angry or upset or sad. lonely. It gives your mind something to focus on and do that's not this problem or this emotion, and then you're just hamster wheeling over it over and over and over and over. And it is okay to just give yourself permission, to be upset. You're allowed to be frustrated about stuff and deal with it. Um, if you're bored, these are all things that are very similar. Sad, you need to go outside, take a shower, journal, you know, let yourself process the emotions. And what it all comes down to essentially is that we need to actually feel the emotion and instead of trying to immediately make it go away. It's being able to deal with the uncomfortable feeling and get through it without, it's just like a workout. So a lot of the times people are uncomfortable in these 30-minute workouts and they don't like working out because it makes them uncomfortable, right? As it's supposed to do. It's breaking you down to make you better, making you grow back better, stronger, faster, right? So understanding that our emotions are very much similar, the same, and that we need to kind of break them down, work them out, and then they'll rebuild and we can deal with them better in the longer term instead of trying to make it go away and just shove it away, put that in a box and put it up on the shelf and deal with that later. That usually doesn't, this distracting yourself from the emotion doesn't typically work, because if you've been doing it this way and you're coping this way and you're using food in this way and you're at this result and you're like, I don't like this result, then we have to fix something that's in the chain, right? Keep doing this over and over and over. Definition of insanity, right? So try this 10-minute reset. So this is an experiment you can try. And so if you find the emotional eating urge coming to the surface, right, it's floating up, give yourself like 10 minutes and think of this, not as a punishment. Come to it as like an experiment. Your little scientist hat is on. And what you're going to do for 10 minutes is first pause, take a few breaths, deep breaths, like fill your whole lungs, exhale. And then whatever that feeling is that you're feeling, let's say it's, uh, let's just do stress, like super stressed and getting frustrated, name it. And then IDing what's the need. Okay, what do I need to do? I need to deal with this stressful. Maybe you got a late payment bill or something and you're just stressing out about it. Okay, what do I need to do? I'm feeling stressed out. This is pissing me off. This is making me mad. What do I actually need to do right now? I need to sit down and dedicate, 10, 30 minutes, whatever it's going to take to fixing XYZ. Then I know I will feel better. But going and grabbing a donut, shoving that in my mouth, and then dealing with it tomorrow probably isn't going to make you feel any better, because you still have that, stress looming over you, that feeling back here. And now you just added a sugar crash to it, right? So what we want to do is to choose a coping strategy. So one of those that I've mentioned earlier is try one of those coping strategies and then check back in with yourself and go, okay, I've handled this problem. I've handled this emotion. Am I still truly hungry? If you're like, yes, this is real hunger. This isn't me going, I feel bad about this and now I want, donuts and Cheetos. If that's the case, then we know, okay, now I'm just being a crybaby, and the crybaby wants, God, I want candy. You're the little kid at the checkout that's crying and wants the candy, right? If it's physical hunger, we're like, yes, I can go eat protein, carbs, and fats in a balanced meal, and I'm hungry and I need to satisfy my hunger. That's fine. Eat. You don't have to earn your food. You don't have to be good, and you don't have to punish yourself for going and eating. But the goal is to make a simple, conscious choice instead of an automatic reaction to go, I had a bad day at work, with all the McNasties that you've got in your pantry, right? And so we also need to remember the other side of the coin is that sometimes you really want the cookie, right? And that's okay. So sometimes it's not emotionally tied. Maybe you just like, hey, I want a cookie. I'm feeling like a cookie. I want a cookie. I'm going to have a cookie. So if you want the cookie, eat the cookie. Sit down, enjoy it, taste it. Don't hide it. Don't be like standing in your pantry, shoving it into your mouth. Like, make it a moment in your day where you're not scrolling your phone and you're like sitting there every bite, enjoying every bite, tasting it, smelling it, loving it, right? Eating this, so that choice is something that you're like, hey, I made this conscious choice. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and now I can move on, right? It didn't come from a place where I was upset and sad, and now I didn't even taste the cookie. Like a lot of the times when you're emotionally eating, People will be like, I looked up and I didn't even notice that I finished the whole bag. And it's like, yeah, because you're not actually eating because you're truly hungry. You're just shoving stuff in there and robotically trying to achieve this feeling by, eating whatever the coping food is. So we just want to make sure that we don't look at that cookie that you chose in that moment to sit down and truly enjoy as that you've ruined the day, right? So one food choice that's outside of what you are trying to choose doesn't determine your health. One snack doesn't erase all of your progress. And having an emotional eating moment doesn't mean you failed. It just means that we're looking for these patterns, right? We have to find these patterns, discover them, and not judge the individual moments, but work to correct the overall pattern. So we have to do a lot of internal work here on how we talk to ourselves because that's the hardest part. And that's a really hard part, right? So instead of telling yourself, I have no self control, maybe you try something's going on and the food is one of the ways I'm trying to cope. I've noticed this. You can say, hey, I'm noticing that when I get upset, I'm reaching for the Milky Way or whatever. So instead of like, I screwed up my diet again, you can say, okay, what did I learn from this right now? I did this, this, and this, and it resulted in me eating this. Now I feel like this. Okay, you can write it out. Link together those chains. And then you can say, instead of saying, oh, I had a bad day, you could look at what do I need today that I wasn't getting. So, reverse engineer it. At the end of the day, be like, okay, this felt like a bad day. Let's go back through. Where can I tweak? What can I do? Because the more time we bring awareness and compassion and come from a mindset of like, I'm going to find the solution to fix this rather than let's shame ourselves into fixing it, which never works, right? Because at some point you're just being the bad guy to yourself and beating yourself up. And that never really leads you to a solution that's based in the positive, right? So for your check-ins, you can ask yourself one of these questions, and I'll leave them here on the screen so you can look at them if you want. But basically, what emotions trigger you to eat? What foods are you reaching for when those emotions get triggered? When does emotional eating mostly happen for you? If you're usually hoping the food will make you feel a certain way, what is that feeling you're looking for? What have you noticed about this trigger and yourself? And what's one non-food coping strategy that would make you feel better? And so try one of those new coping strategies. If you get an emotional eating scenario this week, try it. Um, you can share it in the comments if you want. You can be very vague and anonymous. But your challenge this week is try to catch yourself once and eliminate that emotional eating. So if you can do the pause, reflect, name it, pick a coping, and then implement that coping, then you can start to work on like, hey, I'm really starting to make these choices because I want to make these choices, and I'm coming from a very controlled choice making place versus the robot that gets upset, sad, and goes home and pounds the Ben and Jerry's, right? And then looks back and go, why did I do that? Where you just kind of like glaze over, and then it's just you know, we don't want to be there. So we got to focus on that pattern, find the spots that are triggering, work on the triggers, and then work on the new coping mechanism, because you're never going to, guess what? You're never going to have stress go away. So just to remember that you're not broken, you're not lacking willpower, and you're not a failure because maybe you chose a food just strictly based on, I want it to make me feel comfy and good and, all the feels, is that we just have to learn how stress and emotions, we can have other ways to deal with them. And that just comes with being open to learning new ways, right? Because the current way that you're implementing isn't working like you would like it to. So once we have more tools in our toolbox, you just get more curious about yourself. You start to pay more attention. You become more self-aware. And this is something that you're never going to be perfect at. It's always going to be progress. And guess what? Things are always going to be changing and adapting. Your patterns are always going to be changing and adapting. So it's an ongoing process that we all go through and that we all have to work at. But just remember, you don't have to be perfect to make progress. And if you need any help with coaching, you can email me at mjstrongstart at gmail.com, and we can talk about whatever it is that you need help with regards to becoming more consistent in your fitness and nutrition. That's what I do, is consistency coaching online, and I'm happy to help you if you have questions or need just somebody to soundboard off of. That's what I'm here for. All right, guys, this was a rather long one, so we're going to wrap it up, and I will chat with you guys later. Hope you got some good nuggets, and have a great week.